Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Project Pocket Monster, the series where we go through and we rebalance old Pokemon that have fallen by the wayside and have been neglected and ignored by Game Freak and have fallen due to something known as power creep. Now, I've explained power creep a number of times in previous videos, but in case you don't know what power creep is when new utilities and abilities are introduced in order to make older ones more irrelevant or not relevant in the current meta. You see this all the time in Pokemon. Obviously, Pokemon in Generation 1, on average, they have worse move pools, they have worse abilities, etc., etc. So, our goal being here is to buff those Pokemon in ways that make them relevant and give them a niche in the current Generation 8 competitive metagame. When we go through and we rebalance these Pokemon, there are a number of assumptions that we make. Now, if you've heard all of this before and you've watched a lot of the rebalancing videos, you can go to this time right here and you can get on with what we're going to do to all of these Pokemon. If not, it'll be really helpful for you to stick around, listen to the assumptions, because then it might answer some of your questions later on down the line. So, I have to pull it up first. So the assumptions are, we're not changing the type chart or type matchups. Fire is still super effective against steel. Rock is still super effective against ice. All of that stuff remains consistent, just as it is in vanilla Pokemon. We're not changing the effects of abilities. Bad abilities like Healer and Leaf Guard, they're going to stay exactly the same. Instead, we're going to opt to give Pokemon better abilities to replace those abilities. We're not changing the base power or power points of moves. So we're not giving Drain Punch 30 PP. We're not giving Astonish 90 base power, and that sort of thing. We're working with what we got. Now, the biggest thing is that all the changes we make have to fit thematically. What does thematically mean? Well, changes we make have to make sense based on previously established lore / their Pokédex entries of these Pokemon. So, when I say it needs to make sense thematically, we're not going to give Quagsire Sacred Fire. A Mudfish doesn't even make sense for it to have Sacred Fire, so of course we're not going to do that. We're also not going to give Quagsire something like Desolate Land or anything like that, you know? It has to make sense based on what the Pokemon is, the lore behind it, its design, its expressed strengths and weaknesses, that sort of thing. This is also a meta without any of the cyclical stuff that Game Freak either has in their games or doesn't have in their games, being Mega Evolution, Z-Moves, and Dynamaxing / Gigantamaxing. None of that exists in this rebalanced meta that we're creating. It's just the vanilla Pokemon. Now, guys, keep in mind, all of this is for fun. None of it is set in stone. If you don't like what I've done to some of these Pokemon, feel free to leave your own suggestions in the comment section down below. If you enjoy this sort of content, be sure to leave a like as well. I'll remind you halfway through the video, but I'm going to tell you again right now. Anyway, yes, so let's get on with the rebalancing. Starting off, we left off with Electabuzz. Now, we're not going to be touching Electabuzz. Why is that? For longtime veterans of this series, you know, it's because Electabuzz is not a fully evolved Pokemon. Therefore, I don't expect it to compete at the same level as fully evolved Pokemon, and I don't feel the need to touch it really at all. So, Electabuzz is going to stay completely as it is. It's got a decent speed tier, decent special attack. It's an okay Eviolite user, nothing crazy, but since it's not fully evolved, I consider it to be like an Ivysaur, so we're not touching it as far as a competitive meta goes. Now take everything that I said about Electabuzz and apply it directly to Magmar, exactly the same things. Magmar is not a fully evolved Pokemon. I consider it to be like a Charmeleon, an Ivysaur, something that doesn't necessarily deserve or have a place in the current competitive metagame, and shouldn't necessarily either. It's got 100 base special attack, 93 speed. It's a decent Pokemon in its own right, but obviously it's not going to compare to other fully evolved fire types. That being said, we are not going to touch Magmar at all in this analysis. We might do something when we get to Magmortar, but until then, I'm going to leave you in suspense. And that brings us to Pinsir, who is in fact a fully evolved Pokemon, and is going to be the first topic of today's video. So, Pinsir. Red and blue, he's not that bad, right? 125 base attacks, pretty good. 100 defense is also pretty solid. Its defensive stats, a little bit lackluster. 65, 70 on the special defensive side isn't very good in its own right. Its base speed is 85 as well, which is actually decently solid. However, so ever since Generation 2, Pinsir has been outclassed in almost every single way by Heracross. Heracross has 125 base attack. It's got 85 base speed. It's got a better defensive profile with 80 HP and 95 special defense. And it's got a fighting type secondary stab, as well as access to Mega Horn, which to this day, Pinsir does not get. Seal gets Mega Horn. Pinsir does not get Mega Horn. There is something absolutely wrong with that. Look at Pinsir's horns. Tell me that that is not embarrassing that this Pokemon does not have Mega Horn yet. That being said, Pinsir did get a Mega Evolution in Generation 6, but since we're not including Mega Evolutions, Pinsir has always been left relegated to pretty much just being a Choice Scarf Revenge Killer, potentially being able to sweep teams with a Choice Scarf Moxie set. Mold Breaker isn't terrible either, but Pinsir doesn't find very much use. Standard bug typing means it's weak to rocks. It's weak to all forms of entry hazards. No levitate. No, nothing like that. It doesn't get access to pivoting. It doesn't get access to U-turn. Nothing like that. So, what do we do to not only separate Pinsir from Heracross, but we need to separate Pinsir from a number of other bug types, and I have a few different ideas. So the first change we're going to make to Pinsir is we're actually going to give Pinsir a ground typing. Now you're wondering, how come you're giving it a ground typing? Well, I'll tell you exactly why. So Pinsir, in its lore, is known to, when it's cold, burrow underneath the ground, as well as when it Mega Evolves, it is so happy that it can finally fly. I thought that giving Pinsir a ground typing does a very good job of contrasting it from its Mega Evolution, and also makes it relatively unique as one of the only bug ground types in existence in the game. It's sturdy like a ground type. It's got the ability to dig down under like a ground type, like a beetle. I thought that a ground type was actually a pretty decent idea for Pinsir. So Mold Breaker and Moxie are two totally fine abilities in my eyes. Moxie's obviously very good. Never going to complain about Moxie. And Mold Breaker is, once again, it's an ability that it doesn't have a wide distribution, and I think that it's actually pretty solid. But I think that Hyper Cutter can be changed for something that will actually give Pinsir not only a niche over Heracross, but a niche over a lot of other bug types. So I want to give Pinsir adaptability. What adaptability does is it gives its same type attack bonus a multiplier of 2 instead of 1.5. This makes Pinsir's bug and ground type moves hit absolutely ridiculously hard, making Pinsir an absolute powerhouse. So, that being said, let's talk about its stats a little bit, and we'll get into some of the moves and, what roles Pinsir should fill as part of a competitive team. So, 125 base attack is totally fine, especially with adaptability. I don't feel the need to boost it at all, nor take any away. Being that only bug and ground type moves are boosted, a good flying type is pretty much enough to, offset those two stab attacks. I'm going to give 10 to its defense, making it a little beefier than its specially defensive counterpart in Heracross. I want to subtract 15 from its special attack. Heracross has a base special attack of 40, and I think that Pinsir having a base special attack of 40 and using those points allocated towards somewhere else is really, really helpful for it. And I want to add those into its special defense, letting Pinsir have a defensive profile of 65, 110, and 85. While not necessarily the same as Heracross's 80, 75, 95, it's still pretty solid. And also, I want to make Pinsir slightly slower. Now you're like, why would you complain about Pinsir's speed, now Heracross outclasses it, but now you'd make Pinsir slower? Well, I think that as a trade-off for having such a powerful ability and adaptability, I think that having Pinsir be slightly slower, albeit 75 is not that slow regardless, but having Pinsir be slower is more fair and balanced. So, maintains its base stat total of 500, but it gives it a better defensive profile and a better way to utilize its stat spread. Now, as far as the moves I want to give Pinsir, because this is where the meat and potatoes comes in with Pinsir, I want to give Pinsir Leech Life, Mega Horn, finally, Lunge, U-Turn, Skitter Smack, and Infestation. I want to give it Drill Run, Sand Tomb, Magnitude, and Earth Power. These are all just same type attack bonus moves, all boosted by adaptability. Obviously, adaptability, Leech Life, Mega Horn, Lunge, Skitter Smack, and U-Turn are all very, very good. Magnitude, you're probably never going to run Sand Tomb or Earth Power, but just in case you wanted to, they're there. Coverage moves, I want to give it Iron Head, Super Fang, Hyper Fang, the Generation 8 move of Snap Trap, which we gave to Kingler previously, Clamp, Circle Throw, and Night Slash. So, there's a lot to unpack here, a lot of moves to unpack here. No setup and support, no crazy boosting moves like Dragon Dance or Agility or anything like that. We're keeping Pinsir to be relegated to being a relatively slower Pokemon. It can't set up Dragon Dance's adaptability, whatever. So it doesn't work in the same way that Crawdaunt would, albeit it works more as a strong offensive pivot and also a revenge killer. So you see Pinsir's moveset. You see that we gave it Leech Life to keep it healthy. The biggest additions to its moveset, I believe, are Mega Horn, U-Turn, Lunge, and even Circle Throw. I think that Circle Throw is actually a pretty decent move on Pinsir. Now, the reason I decided to give Pinsir things like Snap Trap, Hyper Fang, Super Fang, Clamp, are because that Pinsir said when it closes on its opponent, it never lets go. And I gave it Circle Throw because it will, once it closes, it will throw its opponent as far away as it possibly can to test its strength. I thought that having Pinsir be able to phase opposing Pokemon while not being a fighting type or not having to use Whirlwind or Roar, doing it offensively, is actually a pretty neat tool for it. Leech Life being able to keep Pinsir healthy, obviously, hits a little bit harder because of same type attack bonus, because of adaptability. U-Turn is probably the biggest addition to Pinsir's kit. Being able to run a potential Scarf adaptability U-Turn set right off the bat is going to be doing crazy amounts of damage. 75 base speed with a Scarf is not crazy. But you also don't have to run a Scarf. You could run Pinsir with its new 85 base special defense. You could run Pinsir with a Assault Vest. While the ground type adds a weakness to water and ice, makes Pinsir a little bit more vulnerable on that side to common attacking types. It also adds a resistance to poison. I think that Bug Ground is an offensive typing that has not been really explored all that much. Obviously, the only Bug Ground type as of recording this is Nincada, and Nincada is a not fully evolved Little Cup Pokemon. Being a Bug Ground type with U-Turn, with access to Earthquake, potentially coverage moves in, U-Turn, Iron Head, even Night Slash, give Pinsir a lot of options to really wreck a team. Pinsir, while vulnerable to a lot of strong attacking moves, now has the power to absolutely back it up. You could run a Scarf Revenge Killer set, you could run an Assault Vest set, you could potentially even run a Leftover set, maybe even a Bug Plate or something, just do crazy all-out damage with Mega Horn or U-Turn. I think that these options actually make Pinsir very interesting and set it apart a lot from not only Heracross, but a lot of other bug types that previously outshined Pinsir. I think that this sort of advantage with its 125 base attack as well as adaptability really lets Pinsir shine in its role as not only a cleanup Pokemon, but also a Choice Scarfer and Revenge Killer. The king of red, blue, and yellow, and a very, very dominant force in gold and silver, Tauros has been humbled as a Pokemon over the course of the last 20 years. It is a normal type. It was given a gift in black and white with sheer force. But besides that, Tauros has been outclassed and outmatched by a number of other sheer force users, faster revenge killers, better normal types with more utility, etc. Tauros is by no means a bad Pokemon. In fact, I think Tauros is actually rather underrated as it is now. Base 100 attack with sheer force, with 110 speed, 75, 95, 70 bulk is actually pretty solid. So Tauros, although it is relatively powerful, it is underwhelming in a way that is very unique to it. It's powerful, it's fast, but it's reliant on not great coverage, as well as normal being a relatively underwhelming attacking type, especially if you're unable to hit ghost types with something like Scrappy. Being a normal type as well, Tauros doesn't hit anything for super effective with stab, which is actually pretty important, and I think that it just kind of flies under the radar as a Pokemon, as it used to be the absolute dominant force. 110 is very fast, 100 base attack is really good, with sheer force it's also pretty good, and Tauros gets access to Intimidate, which is in itself a pretty decent defensive utility trait. Now, 75, 95, 70 base defensive profile is not that bad. 490 base stat total is pretty good as well. But I think that in order to buff Tauros, we really only need to change a couple of things about it. Starting off, instead of Anger Point, while thematic, I want to give Tauros access to Reckless. It is a bull. I think that all of these abilities sort of fit it. I think Reckless just gives it another option to use recoil moves. Now all of a sudden your double edges are hitting crazy hard. Your wild charges are hitting crazy hard. And honestly, we have another recoil move we're going to talk about. But Being able to hit even a little bit harder. Normally you're going to be running a Sheer Force set. Intimidate is a niche option, but a Reckless set gives Tauros a pretty decent boost in power if you don't want to end up running a Life Orb. Now you could run a Choice Scarf Double Edge set with Reckless, and it would still be just as fast and hit just as hard. I want to give Tauros 10 points into its HP, 5 points into its attack, subtract 10 points from its special attack, and give 5 points into its speed. So, 5 points into its speed and 5 points into its attack. All it does is just beef Tauros up just a tiny bit to compete with the competition. 10 points into its HP rounds out its bulk a little bit better. It's a very simple way of buffing a Pokemon, is to buff its stats. But I think that Tauros actually didn't need that much to be successful as a Pokemon anyway. I think that just a small boost to its speed stat and attack stat is really all that Tauros needs. It's a little bit bulkier, a little bit faster, hits a little bit harder, and I think that with Reckless, Intimidate, and Sheer Force all being very good and useful abilities, actually gives Tauros this versatility to how it can be run. So, let's talk about the moves I want to give it. I want to give Tauros Head Charge, which is the signature move of Bouffalant. I want to give it Flame Charge, Foul Play, and Head Smash. So, I'm going to actually look up Head Charge because it's been a hot minute. So the only difference between Head Charge and Double Edge is that Head Charge gives a quarter recoil damage, while Double Edge gives a third. That is the literal only difference. They're both 120 base power, both 100% accurate. Head Charge is just a better move for Tauros. Now, this does mean that it's less separated between it and its cousin in Unova, Bouffalant, but it's okay. We'll get to Bouffalant when we get to Bouffalant way down the line. Now, Flame Charge is a really, really big deal on Tauros. This gives Tauros a physical fire type move, albeit it's only a base 50 move. Being able to boost your speed off of a Flame Charge and then start hitting things with really powerful attacks, potentially Reckless boosted, potentially Sheer Force boosted, gives Tauros a lot of options. A lot of normal types already sort of get these fire type coverage moves, and I think that as a bull, it makes sense for Tauros to get heated, start to be going a little bit faster, start seeing red, that sort of thing. I didn't want to give Tauros anything like Flare Blitz or even Blaze Kick, because I thought that that was a little too much for Tauros' coverage. But I think that Flame Charge is a good place to start. Foul Play, it's just a dark type coverage move. It's a little bit better. Prevents things from boosting in Tauros' face, although you wouldn't want to do that anyway because you're going to take a really, really powerful hit. And Head Smash, last but not least, it is a rock type recoil move, works with Reckless. It doesn't work with Sheer Force, but that's okay. It's an absolutely absurdly powerful rock type move, and even though it's non-stab, with base 105 attack, it's going to be doing a lot of damage to not only flying types, but to bug types, and basically pretty much anything that comes in. It's an alternative to Rock Slide, and it really helps Tauros out a lot, especially if it's running a Reckless set. Now, all of this being said, these are very, very simple ways to buff Tauros, improve its coverage, and improve its stat distribution. I think that Tauros is a pretty decent Pokemon in its own right already, but I think that giving it just a little bit of a push and giving it better coverage and better stats really go a long ways to make Tauros potentially shine in the upper tiers of the metagame. What's going on, everyone? If you made it this far, you've hit the halfway point of the video, and you know what that means? That means it's time for me to bug you about being subscribed to this YouTube channel. Yes, we're almost at 500 subscribers as of right now. If you like the video, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I do rebalancing Pokemon every single week. We are almost done with Kanto. Remember, guys, I am a one-man show, so I do all of the editing, all of the recording, all of the prep work, etc., etc. All of the support means a ton to me. We're gunning for 1,000 subs. We're going to get that community tab, but that's enough of me prattling on. I'm going to get you back to the rebalancing. So that brings us to Gyarados, and I don't even think we really need to talk about why Gyarados is so good. It's got Intimidate, it's got Moxie, 125 base attack, 100 special defense, 81 speed, 95 HP. Got very, very good stats. Very good stat spread. It gets access to Waterfall. It gets access to Bounce, Dragon Dance. You could run a Intimidate defensive set. You could run a Dragon Dance Moxie set. Gyarados gets out of control. Having access to Power Whip as well, a very strong grass type attack from a water type, is super unique and lets Gyarados break past a lot of water ground types that it would otherwise struggle with. Gyarados is fine as it is. It's always been a staple of competitive play, always been very, very good, and I think that even in Generation 8, with the introduction of heavy-duty booties, Gyarados is even a little bit better. Being flying type means it's not going to get hit with toxic spikes, it's not going to get hit with regular spikes. While it is a little bit weak to stealth rocks, again, that can be offset by the booties, and flying type actually helps Gyarados a lot defensively. That all being said, I think that Gyarados is totally fine as it is, and we're not going to be touching it at all. And this brings us to Lapras, who... Oh, Lapras. Lapras is a Pokemon that is near and dear to a lot of fans' hearts. It is very iconic. Water Ice type, 535 base stat total, 130 HP, 95 special defense, 80 defense. You'd think that Lapras would be a good Pokemon with that stat total, but there's a number of things that hold Lapras back from really being impressive in its own right. For one, being a water ice type has a lot more weaknesses. Ice is definitely a hindrance as far as its defensive profile. While 130 base HP is very, very nice, it doesn't have any sort of reliable recovery either. It doesn't get access to recover or slack off. Its best recovery move is rest and I believe Aqua Ring. 85 attack and special attack, both relatively underwhelming. Especially if you want to boost with Dragon Dance. 85 attack is really not going to be doing work for you until you've already set up a couple of turns. As well as 85 special attack is also relatively underwhelming. You can slap a Life Orb or a Choice Specs on it, but really, with base 60 speed, Lapras just has a very awkward stat distribution that doesn't really do it any favors in any of the roles that it looks like it could potentially do. So, there's a few ways I want to change Lapras. For starters, I think Water Absorb and Shell Armor are two perfectly fine and good abilities. Water Absorb obviously heals 25% HP off of getting hit with a water type move, and Shell Armor in itself prevents critical hits. But Hydration, I think that we can change out Hydration for something a little bit better. Now, Lapras is known for having one of the most gentle hearts among all of sea Pokemon. So, I thought it'd be really interesting to give Lapras the ability, the previous signature ability of Magearna, Soul Heart. Now you're thinking, oh my god, Soul Heart Lapras, I want it, I need it. Yes, Soul Heart Lapras, but I'll do you one even better. Lapras is based on a mythical Loch Ness monster that's probably a dinosaur, so I think I'm going to give Lapras a dragon typing. Now, some people decide Lapras should be a water dragon type. I personally am going to make Lapras a Dragon Ice type. The only other Dragon Ice type, I believe, is Kyurem. Dragon actually offsets a lot of Lapras' previous weaknesses, fire, grass, that sort of thing, and as well as electricity, and actually lets Lapras be a better presence on the field as a strong Pokemon. That all being said, I want to give Lapras 5 points into its attack, which isn't exactly that much, but it does help out with the Dragon Dance set. And I want to give it a whopping 15 points into its special attack for a base stat total of 555. Now, usually I don't like to buff Pokemon that much, but 555 is the level of Arcanine. So if you think about it like that, it actually makes perfect sense for Lapras to be at that point. A lot of Pokemon like that are more legendary and mythical, I think that fit somewhere between the starters and the actual legendary Pokemon. They fall right in the middle at the 550, 555 range, and I don't think there's nearly enough of them, frankly. So I think that Lapras being 555, especially continuing with that speed tier as well as that defensive profile, is actually not a huge deal for it. Just boosting its offenses a little bit definitely doesn't do that many crazy favors for it. So with Soul Heart, Lapras has access to passive boosts after getting a kill. As far as its moves go, I want to give Lapras Glaciate, I want to give it Icicle Crash, Clanging Scales, Dragon Tail, Dragon Breath, and Draco Meteor. As far as its coverage, I want to give it Hyper Voice, Drill Peck, and Razor Shell. And as setup in support, I want to give Lapras access to Reliable Recovery in Recover. So, let's recap. What have we done for Lapras? Dragon typing, a little bit higher attack, letting it utilize its Dragon Dance set just a tiny bit better. Hits a little bit harder with its Icicle Crashes, Ice Shards if you want to run a Liquidation set or a Earthquake set, you can do that. 100 base special attack, meaning that its Freeze Dries hit harder. It's now can hit with Clanging Scales, Draco Meteor even, if it really, really wants to. It's not getting any sort of water type, same type attack bonus anymore. So Hydro Pumps are going to be a little less powerful. Surfs are going to be a little less powerful, that sort of thing. Drill Peck you could run on the physical set. Razor Shell you could run on the physical set. Because it has a giant shell on its back, I thought that sort of made a little bit of sense. And obviously you could also run Lapras as a recovery monster now. You could run Lapras as a wall. A Dragon Ice type wall isn't necessarily the best defensive or especially defensive type, but it actually is pretty decent. 130 HP with 95 special defense max invested. You could take a lot of fire type moves, grass type moves, electric type moves. You can heal them off with recovery. Lapras already has access to Heal Bell. It gets access to Paris Song, a number of support options if it really, really wants to. And I think that having access to a reliable recovery, as well as having a boosting ability in Soul Heart, means that Lapras is now quite good. Obviously, being an Ice Dragon type, there are a number of weaknesses. Most notably, now it's weak to the Fairy type. It's still very susceptible to getting revenge killed by a strong physical fighting type, as well as Rock type, and now even other Dragon types. But I think that overall, these changes go a long ways to improve Lapras. I think that they're really nice. I think that Dragon Ice type is really unique, separates Lapras a lot from its other Water Ice type competition in Dugong and Walrein. So I think that all of these tools and more go a long ways to make Lapras viable. It's still not perfect, but 555 base stat total, Dragon Ice typing, Soul Heart, along with Recover, Clanging Scales, Draco Meteor, as well as its boost to its physical and special attacking stats, really help it out a lot, and I think that this is a really fun, unique way to make Lapras viable in the current metagame. I really like this one. I really like spending time with balancing Lapras, so I hope you guys like this one. Now, Ditto. Very, very interesting case. Ditto is a meme. Ditto has always been and will always be a meme. Obviously, in Generation 5, they gave it Imposter, and Imposter made Ditto anything that it could ever want to be. It can always fit on a team, it can always run a Choice Scarf, it can always capitalize off of anything's boosts, it's always in the back pocket, it is Ditto. And that makes Ditto really interesting, and I don't think that I'd even need to touch Ditto at all, because the only things I would do to Ditto are potentially just increase its stats to like 70 across the board instead of 48. But you're going to be running Imposter anyway, so it doesn't even make sense for me to do that because you're going to change those stats anyway. So I think that Ditto is totally fine as it is. Ditto can come in with a Scarf, it can copy boosts of opposing Pokemon, it can Stealth Rock, it can lead, it can Wall Break, it can do literally anything. Anything Ditto wants to do, it can do as long as the player is utilizing it correctly. That's in the hands of the player, not in the hands of the Ditto, so therefore we're not going to touch Ditto. Which brings us to Vaporeon. I think that Vaporeon, well, yes, it says it's in NU right now. I think that Vaporeon's actually very, very good. 130 base HP, 110 special attack. We were just talking about how a Water-type Cleric is pretty good as well. Lapras being now Dragon Ice. I think that Vaporeon does it very, very well. Toxic, Heal Bell, Wish, Protect, Scald, and now it gets Flip Turn in Generation 8 as well. There's a lot of things that make Vaporeon very good. You can run it max specialty defensive, you can run it max defensive. 130 base HP wishes are going to be absolutely crazy. Vaporeon is a very good water type. While it's a little bit basic, I think that it does what it needs to do. And while it might not be as good as, say, Umbreon or Sylveon, I think that as a water type and as a Pokemon, 110 base special attack with Scald is actually pretty solid. It does things better than a lot of other water type walls, most notably Slowbro and Alomomola. So I think that Vaporeon actually has a place in the current competitive metagame, and therefore we're not going to be touching it at all. Same thing goes with Jolteon. Jolteon has always been, while it might be considered overshadowed by things like Raikou and Zorora, Jolteon is a pretty good Pokemon, pretty good speed stat, really good special attack stat, access to Quick Feet, Volt Absorb. You could run Volt Switch, Thunderbolt, Shadow Ball. Without access to Hidden Power actually sort of hurts Jolteon a little bit, but Jolteon also gets Yawn, so Volt Switch Yawn is a set that has worked. It's kind of funny. Being obviously a very fast electric type's always a good thing, and I think that Jolteon is actually pretty solid of a Pokemon. I'm not going to be touching it. There are a few things that we could probably do to it, but when I balance the evolutions, you have to think about how it reflects on the other evolutions, and I think that Jolteon is exactly where it needs to be in that regard. However, Flareon is absolutely not where it needs to be in that regard. Oh man, where do we even start with Flareon? Flareon has been a disappointment ever since Red and Blue. It's always been in the shadow of different Pokemon. Its base stat total and base stat spread is so strange. 130 attack, 110 special defense. What were they thinking? 110 special defense and 130 attack for a fire type that was all special. It didn't make any sense at all. Obviously, Flash Fire and Guts are two very good abilities. It doesn't work in the same way of Volt Absorb and Water Absorb. You don't get HP from it. But Flareon is very unique as a fire type. Obviously, its most common set is the Guts set. Guts Toxic Orb means that Flareon can run Guts Flare Blitz, Guts Facade. It gets access to Return, Superpower. While its move pool is not very good, having access to potentially a Choice Band set as well as a Toxic Orb set is rather okay, but it is outclassed by a number of different fire types, even in the lower tiers. It's outclassed by, Charizard, it's outclassed by Typhlosion, it's outclassed by, most notably, things like Darmanitan, Infernape, Blaziken, a whole bunch of fire types. So, what do we do to Flareon to keep with this evolution theme while also buffing it? So, I have a few suggestions. A couple of very minor things that I think will go a long way to make Flareon better. Obviously, it's Flareon. It's a fire type. That's it. It's staying a fire type. But I want to swap Flareon's special attack with its speed. That's it. So that's all I want to do with Flareon. Now, this seems really simple, and it is very simple. And no other evolution has a stat spread like this, so I don't mind doing it. All of them have the same stat spread, just dispersed differently. So all of them have a base 65 stat, a base 130 stat, a base 60 stat, etc. This makes Flareon still unique, but makes it quite a bit better. 95 base speed, obviously much better than 65. This makes Flareon actually an immediate threat. You can run a Choice Scarf Flareon now. Even the Toxic Orb and the Choice Band set, now all of a sudden you're outpacing literally almost everything under base 90, which is kind of absurd. Flareon is now a very physical, offensive fire-type presence in the same essence of Darmanitan. It does now speed tie Darmanitan. While not necessarily as powerful as Darmanitan, it is still relatively good. It doesn't get access to U-turn or anything like that, but I want to give Flareon a third ability in Hustle. What Hustle does is it boosts the attack stat of a Pokemon in exchange for accuracy. So, if you want to run a Hustle set, you could run a Hustle Flare Blitz set, you could run a Hustle, Quick Attack, Hustle Return, Double-Edged Superpower. While you're risking a miss, now all of a sudden you have Darmanitan levels of power without any sort of Life Orb trade-off. As far as moves I want to give Flareon, I want to keep it very simple. I only want to give it Flame Charge, and I only want to give it Blaze Kick. Blaze Kick is just a move that lets Flareon do physical fire type damage without having to take recoil. Most of the time, you're probably going to be running Flare Blitz anyway, but it gives Flareon the option. And I also want to give it Flame Charge, because being 100% accurate, being able to boost its speed, a lot of fire types already get access to Flame Charge. I think that it makes absolute sense for Flareon to get access to Flame Charge. So, there it shall be. Now, that's about it for this week's episode of Rebalancing Pokemon. Next week, we finish up Kanto. And the week after that, I will probably go through and I'll probably do an addendum, a retrospective of everything that we have done. It might be a little bit longer. I might do it on a stream and cut it down to highlights. Not totally sure. I would definitely like to potentially discuss all of it with you guys. I don't know. We'll see. Let me know if that's something that you're very interested in. Not as many people watch this rebalancing series as they have Radical Red or some of the other essay videos I've done in the past, but this is a series that I've put a lot of time and effort into, so I'd really appreciate a lot of feedback. Remember, guys, it's all for fun. If you disagree with stuff that I've done or want to comment on some of the cool changes that I've made, put it in the comments. Let me know. I love creating the discussion. I love, generating this this theory crafting community. It's a ton of fun. Talking about Pokemon and what we can do to make them better is one of my favorite things to do, and that's why this series exists in the first place. If you guys like the video, be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Next week, we finish up Kanto. As I said, thank you all for watching. Till next time.